Hello, I'm Leroy Garcia, and this is Blue Rain Gallery Podcast. Today at the gallery, we're having an opening for two special people we've been working with for many years now. It's about like 10 years already, 7 years, 10 years. And so we have a little history. They both have excelled in their mediums. Bryce, obviously, in sculpture, in bronze, and Matthew in his paintings. And maybe someday we'll see some sculpture out of Matthew as well. We'll see. That'll be another conversation for another day. But it's a beautiful show. We'll have Leah show some panoramic views of the show so you can get a sense of the aesthetic and the hard work that they've done. Let's start with Matthew here a little bit. This body of work, how would you describe it?
Well, I feel like one of the reasons that Bryce and I show well together is even though it's oil painting and sculpture, we both like these confident marks where you can kind of visually see how it came together and have that application, that confident application say so much. It creates energy in the piece, movement in the piece, and a lot of the work I'm doing right now is building with soft areas and layers where you're seeing through a veil of paint into the form that was underneath. A piece I'm looking at right now, I sketched this tree all in these dark, deep red tones. So when I scrape into the trunk of the tree, you can see this red coming through where the gesso is still holding, and your eye can kind of deconstruct the piece versus a glaze over top of that same tone, and the relationship of this warm glow where it's actually over top of this same tone. And then as well as textures, I like using a roller to lift the paint. It gives me a very different effect in this same tone. So when it dries completely, I can use perhaps a brayer and just catch the top of those edges, or a palette knife, and have this texture soften. And that's how I like to work, just so there's variety and immediacy. And then as you stand back, it comes together and has a really realistic feel to it.
Yeah. Matthew's developed a really beautiful style, and you can look back at some of our podcasts which we've done with him to describe his techniques, but there's little or no brushwork in his paintings, right? It's scraped paint. So there's a lot of medium on the work, very texturous. And one thing I also wanted to bring out was maybe the commonality between you and Bryce is the mountain air, right? The scenes in the mountains in the wilderness, where all these beautiful creatures are raised and grow and develop, from the eagles to the little mice to everything, right? So that's a pretty cool thing. Tell us about this big painting, Matthew.
So I love being outside, and I feel like this was titled appropriately. It's called The Moment We Wait For. When I see clouds and you're away from it all, you're getting this sense of almost a meditative moment. If you've ever, been fishing, camping, and you leave the group, I like these little lights off far in the distance that could be perhaps a farm or a dairy or campers. I see my family over there with a campfire going, and I can hear them laughing and telling stories that Grandpa used to tell. He always had these big fish stories, whether it was hunting, he always had the biggest animal ever caught on record. But that's what I love, is these emotional, bold marks that sit on top of layers and soft tones. So I can get a really fun, soft blend in these areas and then build so that you have a really big, bold scrape of heavy paint that sits on top, and you get these fun contrasts with scrapes, built layers. So your eye kind of wanders through it just like it does when you're looking into a campfire.
I love this amount of paint. It reminds me a little bit of Louisa McQueen and a few, right? And she was so beautiful as far as painting. Great artist. There's a couple paintings in here that are really unique too, that like different format. Like this is a really busy piece that I've seen a few of these, but very few. And there's 2 paintings in this exhibit like this.
So this was a fun piece because in the composition, you're kind of drawn to this area first, and I didn't want the flow of the water to take you out of the painting. So these abstract reds that turned into logs or more obvious rocks, I brought this across to stop your eye so it can wander more up to this soft haze and glow. But I'm using all sorts of tools. So these are drips, letting the paint drip like this to create a tree. And while it's wet, that is gesso coming through the tree to create that highlight, and I'm scraping paint off and just leaving it. And then because this is so busy, anytime you paint mossy rocks and water flowing, it's instantly going to feel busy. So I kept this area really dark and dense, which is something I love about the mountains, that if you wander up through here, chances are you're going to scare a deer or something that feels safe and secluded.
Maybe a bear.
Oh, yeah. Maybe one of Bryce's animals, right? So I really love this piece. Your eye kind of hikes up in there, and it has that dense, mountainous feel.
Yeah. There's we'll visit another one over there, but there's a couple I wanted to visit. This scene was really cool because you have a little distance with the aspen grove, and I love aspens. A lot of people do love aspens, and this is a smaller piece, but I love it. This is really good.
Thanks. So I feel like when aspens are painted, because they quake and shimmer, you so often see these little brush marks. And I wanted to do one where I'm creating a texture, and that was done with a roller, and then let it dry. So when I scrape across those textures on the edges, you get all these cool little movement in needles with very big, bold scrapes on top of those layers that have dried. This could be my favorite, though. As these colors go into an overcast, kind of cloudy sky, these violet tones, I'm trying to create so much variation on the edges. Some of them are very drippy and wispy. Others are so immediate and just sit and represent the trunks of several perhaps dry aspen trees or pines in the shadows. And then right here, the sun is broke through that overcast cloud and you get the warmth. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's even where the snow is, where, if you stood in that sunlight, you could almost sunbathe. I love that contrast.
Yeah. I actually love the ethereal gradation right here. That's pretty cool. But the lines across, you're right. There's another one that I like. And this must be more of a Southwest scene. Looks like a pinon, right? Yeah. Tell us about that.
Well, I think I've always just been drawn to this look. When I'm driving through an area that's kind of a open New Mexico scene with these big clouds and the red dirt, I love seeing the color around these greens. It's such a beautiful, natural color. And then when I get to paint a tree as a portrait, there's something unique to that feel to me, because when you see these pinyon trees, they grow all over the mountainside, and then to focus on one that's really mature and like an old oak kind of feel. But when it's front and center, it kind of plays into the tree's character, like a portrait, where if you were to paint a famous person, they're front and center like that, being stoic.
It makes me think about being a little kid in Towson, going around to the pinon trees looking for pinon. Nice. And there's usually a rattlesnake somewhere in there too, so you got to be careful.
Oh, I like that. I like you said that.
Yeah, you never know what you're going to get under the shade of a pinon tree. That's interesting. And okay, let's go and let's finish with this one here. This is like the other one we were talking about. It's a different ambiotic style than the other landscapes that you're doing, which are a lot of clouds, a lot of sky, and this. What is it about this style or this type of scene that you're liking and working with? I think I have some ideas, but tell us.
So, like the other piece where this is the soft, dense area, and I'm using a lot of textures now, this is not a texture from the canvas. This is a very smooth board. So when I scrape, I can have the implication of dark, deep bushes here, but this feels more like light catching frost that's still on pine trees and keep it so minimal, so contemporary, where other areas you see where highlight and moss are growing. You can see the sandbar and how the water is shallow versus deep. But this is what I was going for. These dead trees are so immediate. I'm using one big scrape to imply, 100 little wispy, willowy branches and dry trees, and then mixing a tone that reads as the highlight of this color, whether it's that orange moss or mountain flowers, letting your imagination play into what the sunlight's hitting, mixing a highlight, putting it in one confident mark, and just leaving it so that the imagination's involved more, even though you can see, we can hike up in there, and right there is where it's warm, and it's kind of the gem of the painting.
The focal point. It reminds me of a good fishing hole right here. Put your fly, let it float in here.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, we appreciate all the hard work. I'd like to encourage people to check out Matthew Sievers on our site. We have a bunch of new work. It's very beautiful. And like I say, we'll have Leah do a panoramic of the show itself. Well, let's get to Bryce at this point. Thank you, Matthew.
Yeah, thanks.
So now we're talking to Bryce. We just talked to Matthew, and we know the similarity, the wildlife itself and nature itself. You seem to be a person that could be in the middle of that scene over there.
Oh, yes, as much as I can.
Fishing and kayaking or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So give us an idea of what you created for this show, or what's new.
Well, one of my favorite new pieces is over here. It's this little... So normally I specialize in wildlife, but having 2 cats and a dog in the house, I guess, has been rubbing off on me. And I really wanted to do this sleepy, really moody cat, just kind of a warm place in the sun. And, I love animals altogether, and I guess one of my favorite things about sculpting animals is the variety. We've got everything from butterflies to birds and bears and everything in between. And I love it. I'll never get bored because there's so many different subject matter.
One of the cool things when you come to Blue Rain Gallery, you'll see Bryce's work just not on pedestals, but you'll see wall formations. Like if we can talk about the fish. Okay, talking about this scene.
Sure.
And Bryce loving the outdoors and fishing and camping and hiking and doing all the wonderful things. But this is something new. I hadn't seen.
This is a new piece as well.
But the wall mounts are very popular and they can go anywhere.
Yes.
That's such a good idea.
Well, it's the kind of path of getting to there has been interesting. With my work, I really love paring it down to the most simple elements. Instead of doing, I feel like, 25 years ago, very traditional wildlife sculpture was almost like a little diorama. Mm-hmm. You'd have a little slice of the trees or something like that. But just in a sense of trying to create a more pure and simple composition, I've gradually pared away all that. So most of my pieces are just the animal, and the composition is encapsulated within it. And that is what led me to do the wall hanging pieces, in that you just can't get more simple than not sitting on anything at all.
Right. I like that because I can vision you out in the wilderness, and there's hummingbirds everywhere, in the summer.
Yes.
And the little fish in the stream, or the butterflies themselves. You'll see him do a lot of butterflies, also the swallows.
Yes.
As wall formations. But obviously his major work is wildlife forms. Believe it or not, one of the more popular pieces that we've sold of yours has been that rattlesnake.
Yes.
It freaks people out. You're like, you walk through it, you're like, ah! You don't want to mess with that. That's under Matthew's tree over there. Under the pinon.
Well, what's funny about the rattlesnake is that there's no middle ground on it. You either love it or you hate it. There's not very many neutral feelings about it. And I kind of love that. That's something, a form of just some hunk of metal can really elicit emotion that way.
Mm-hmm. When we put it on the floor, the people come in, some of them jump.
Yes.
It's so realistic. They're like, rattlesnake.
Some people are mad. They're, why would you sculpt a rattlesnake?
No, it's a beautiful, rattlesnakes are beautiful creatures. You just have to know your limits with them. But they usually warn you.
They do. That's true. They have a warning system. Mm-hmm. And as a sculptor, I love the sort of challenge of creating the scales. Each one of those is sculpted individually. You have to start at the tail and do them overlapping all the way
So
up.
you're making a little bit of clay and sticking
That's exactly
it in?
right, yeah. Yeah, a little bit at a time, and really, in order to, you have to keep them in a row diagonally as well as in line with the body, so it's hard to keep it all in line and have it look right without getting too messy.
Now, are you participating in the orchestration of the patinas? Like
Yes,
the color
absolutely,
palettes?
yes.
And Nathan Bennett, who we also represent, does a lot of Bryce's patinas.
Yes, that's
and
correct.
He's very, very good. But
Yes.
this patina, it looks simple, but that's kind of a complex one.
It is a very complex one, and this is one that I chose because if I went to all the trouble to do all the detail in the scales, I feel like it should have a patina that matched that.
Yeah. Well, that's also, I appreciate the creativity on that because I know that's a hard thing to do. One of the other pieces that I really liked here was the owl. And
thank you.
owls are such beautiful creatures.
They are.
And I've never seen one live until a few years ago. One flew, me and my wife were sitting in a hot tub, and a big owl, like a 6-foot wingspan or 7-foot wingspan,
Yeah.
just flew over us. I'm like, oh my gosh! And he visits us from now on,
Oh,
time to
that's
time.
wonderful.
You just hear it's a low tone, hoo hoo. You know, it's weird. It's not like the hoo hoo.
Yes.
But yeah, what do you like about owls?
Well, birds are one of my favorite subject materials to begin with. And I love owls because they're so fierce. I did volunteer work at a wildlife rehab place for a number of years, and we took in all sorts of birds. There were a lot of birds like falcons that had been used in falconry that were then rehabbed, got injured or whatnot. One time I was talking to the director of the place, and I said, why do you never use great horned owls for falconry? Because they're so strong, they're so tough. They would seem like the absolute perfect falconry bird.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, a great horned owl would rather die than be your slave.
Yeah.
And they just will not submit. So I've always loved that. And that's why I called it sovereign. Like, they will not submit. And so this one, I kind of posed him like a Roman centurion almost, like with his shield and then his spear.
So in an owl's habitat, where are they making their nests and do that? In the top of trees or?
Top of trees. Great horned owls will do a big pile nest if you see, and they build on them every year. Like most of the time, they'll come right back to the same spot.
Yeah.
Like in the V of a tree. They'll sometimes find a hollow spot too, but normally great horned owls are going to have up in a tree.
They're
like
big. They need space
fork. Yeah.
to move.
Yep.
Okay, so they're speaking of birds. This was a new one too that I
Yes.
hadn't seen before.
So this is a little tabletop version. I think anyone who likes doing birds and gravitates to doing eagles. I've done a number of eagles, bald eagles, for years just because of the kind of strength icon and just the representation that they have. So this is one of my newest one, kind of a pose where he's in action but still static. And normally I do things the life size, but I wanted to do this one in the tabletop version.
When I was a child, you would rarely see bald eagles.
Yeah.
And now you see them all over.
Yes.
And they are big, beautiful creatures as well, like the big horned owl.
Yes.
It's just amazing to see them in wildlife.
Oh yeah, you never get tired of seeing a bald eagle. In the
Yeah. But we appreciate you and all your hard work, Bryce, and coming
Thank
into
you.
Blue Rain. And thank you for participating in today's podcast.
Thank you.